bringing back Faheem. And also, fantastic, there's Ollie. So just to introduce Ollie quickly, and then we'll get into some questions. Ollie Kirman is a senior consultant at MP Smarter Travel with a particular passion for creating cycling cities. His work helps car drivers to better evaluate sustainable commuting options through incentive schemes, subsidies, gamification, and measures such as LTNs, low traffic neighbourhoods, and clean parking. We talked a lot about parking and congestion and levies, etc., as perhaps a lever that needs to be enforced a little bit more. So we've got about 15 minutes. So yeah, just crack into some questions, and as we did prior, fairly quick answers as we go along. So, question here from Andrew Bradley. Hi, Andrew. On geographic inequality of spend on transport, I was interested to hear the Transport Select Committee yesterday talk about the minimum 3 buses a day for all villages in the Republic of Ireland. Would this sort of idea help in the UK? Maybe I'll start with you, Ollie, because you haven't spoken yet. So let's get you into it. What do you think about adding more buses? Obviously, frequency of buses has got to surely help.
Absolutely. This is not really my area of expertise, but I'm happy to speak on it. I think clearly this is a problem that a lot of people have where buses also end too early. So if you want to kind of encourage other kind of behaviors like consumption, getting people to economic centres, you're going to need more regular transport services. Often the choice to make a more sustainable transport choice, it's about what's easiest. I don't think always appealing to someone's sort of sense of good for the world or kind of concern for the climate is always the best option. Often it's about making it the easiest choice possible. So I think that this seems like obviously a good sense way of doing it. There are obviously issues in terms of the cost of putting these buses on, and if they're not well used, then what's that look like for the local authority?
Yeah, fair point. I think, well, wrapped up into that question, it's something that I was going to come back to you about, Faheem, which is about service, because you talked about mass mobility as a service, but the service part's really important to me. And I think something like that, there's something here about the service, like, for example, using trains. I know that if I use trains, it's a good transport choice, but equally, if it doesn't go quite right, there's delay repay. And I'm thinking from a service perspective, when it comes to buses, do we not need to be looking at this a little bit more? So part of that mass thing is actually really recognizing we need to deliver a service. And when that service doesn't work, there's recompense. But yeah, what do you think there, Faheem?
Oh, for me, it's if we are to achieve mobility as a service, there has to be a single platform. For example, a classic example is if a bus has broken down, what do the people do? So the app or the information system should be able to give you another form of mobility. That develops trust in the system. For example, if the bus has, again, the same scenario, the bus has broken down, then the whole transportation system should be able to arrange maybe a cab or a next bus or guide you towards the nearest train station or the tram station. It's just helping you make the informed decisions. Now, the question, I understand there is a question in that who pays for it. Well, that's a debate for the coming years to have, but you have to have such a system in which people have trust in it. A single bad experience, that's what our research showed, a single bad experience either in their car travel or either in their train travel, metro, or even during the walking or cycling, it shifts people from that sustainable mode towards the car travel. So in order for us to develop trust in the system has to be resilient, and you have to help people, a two-way communication with the commuter rather than just cancelling the service. And the question regarding a mandatory bus service, well, I have a different take on that one. I'm a strong proponent of sustainable transportation system, but if you mandate a bus to every village, there's a frequency you're mandating, but we do not know what is the economic condition or what is the requirement in that particular village. Maybe it's a small village of, say, 100 people or 70 people, and there are some villages here which all of them are having is a high resilience on car, all of them having big, say, Range Rovers, or it's a typical agriculture village, so all of them are having their tractors, or there's already high car dependency. In that way, we sometimes waste the public money on providing a service which is not required. So there cannot be a general solution to everything. That's what our research shows. There has to be specific things.
Sorry, Faheem, just to cut in, because we've got quite a few questions. I want to get some questions around cycling. I want to get some more on here. So, Ashleigh, there's a question here. Do you have data on the impacts of the national entitlement card in Scotland for young people accessing free bus use? Is that something you've looked at?
Yeah, so in our report, we've got a case study on the young person's bus pass. So that was introduced in 2022 by the Scottish Government. So anybody under the age of 22 gets free bus travel in Scotland. There's been a 1-year evaluation that we reviewed as part of the audit, and that found that 59% of young people had signed up to free bus travel. And there was some evidence that it's increasing the number of young people using the bus, and some limited evidence that it's showing a modal shift away from the car. It's still too early to say whether that's actually influencing young people's decisions about whether they want to learn to drive. But I think there may be another evaluation out soon. But that wasn't covered in our audit report. But as part of the audit, we spoke to a youth advisory panel from across Scotland. And those that lived in the cities thought the young person's bus pass was absolutely fantastic, but those in the countryside hadn't applied for it because it's no use if there's no buses. So what we were talking about just there about the 3 buses a day, unless you've got those services, a reliable service, then you're not going to see the benefits of it. And so thinking about how buses can be spread out across the country in areas where it's not economically viable for them. That's one of the real challenges to address.
Okay. Ollie, I'm going to come to you because in some of the previous pieces earlier today, we've heard very heavily that obviously still driving to work is still remains as the dominant mode. We've obviously then been introduced to the mobility hierarchy. So there's a question here around, do you think the sustainable travel hierarchy needs to be endorsed and embedded by government using incentives and tax breaks? I'm interested in some of your thoughts around the use of incentives to get people to change their ways, get more people to use their own car less, obviously get on their bikes. Give us a little bit from your perspective.
I have a lot of experience working with incentives for people to adopt cargo bikes. So this is both businesses and individuals running subsidy programs. What we've seen is that although this is very useful, there always has to be an engagement stage and cost is a barrier inevitably in a lot of these cases, but there needs to be you need to win someone over in a way prior to even presenting them with the cost option. In a lot of cases, I am speaking very specifically about the adoption of cycling and cargo bikes here, but one example of that would be the ULEZ scrappage scheme, where you could get money towards cargo bike, but almost no one replaced that. And that is actually more about changing someone's concept of what's possible with active travel and their reliance on a car. There's a step before those incentives and tax breaks, where I think that actually the question about changing the status symbol needs to go alongside that, about how do you create a cultural shift, and that's to community advocates, people who can work as ambassadors for the concept, and are community leaders who can promote it to people that trust them as well. So although obviously it's very important, there are other steps or other measures that need to come alongside that to encourage mode shift.
I think, well, you mentioned it, and there is that question around the status symbol of the car. And I think probably for all of you, I mean, this piece here, the car is still marketed, and we still obviously give it a lot of road space. Some of the questions, again, in terms of what we need to do, we need to be fixing potholes and this type of stuff. Where do you see this? Where do you see the government playing a bigger role? Governments across the United Kingdom playing a bigger role to make active travel more attractive and more of a style. I mean, we are seeing it a little bit. I mean, I think I'm hearing and feeling the perception is, public transport is better because it's more connected. But maybe start with yourself, Ashleigh. What can be done here?
So I think this is where we get into the politics and the difficult political decisions. What we heard a lot was, it's all very well providing active travel solutions, but actually you need to make it more difficult to use your car. You need to make it more expensive, either in time or in money, to use your car. So that comes down to parking strategies, comes down to road reallocation, or road charging. So that's what we kind of clump in together as demand management solutions. And I think there's this perception among a lot of people that the car is cheaper, because you don't think about the annual MOT, the cost of the car. You think solely of, if I drive my car to work, it'll cost me that compared to the cost of the bus. So there's a way of thinking about that. That's difficult to do politically, especially when there's elections coming up. We heard this morning about some people don't see this as important. So making those kind of big political decisions are difficult, and that's for ministers to decide if this target is important to them. That's maybe where they need to think about going. But again, that's a lot of that may be out of their control. And so it's thinking about ways to make it more attractive to cycle and to walk, and more difficult to use your car. But then again, you come into the equality side of things, that if you're making it more difficult to use your car, how do you keep society open to those that rely on the car? So not easy at all. But there's some of the conversations that ministers and councillors will need to be thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, that equality and inequality, and you mentioned inequality, Faheem. So is mass the gateway to make other modes other than the car cool? I mean, is this what it's all about, or is it? Yeah, how do we get mass to be that thing that unlocks all of this? Well,
first of all, sometimes the arguments that we put forward, there's a strong backlash from the car. There's a strong backlash from the people who own the car. So car has to be a part of the system, but the way the system has to be designed is that it encourages you to make smarter or better choices. There will be a high ownership of the car in this country for some time. But when we say mobility, so we make things much more easier for people to use other modes. So once we are going into vehicle automation, at that time we have an opportunity, say the way we are using tax credits, we can use a similar concept for your car travel also. There can be a system designed in which a person can commute by car, or there are free credits by using the car on the public infrastructure for a few miles in a week, something like that. That encourages, the more you drive, the more you have to pay. But you understand that there are some people who will have dependence on car, and then people who are vulnerable in our society, like people who will absolutely need a car for just to do their everyday travel or just do their everyday shopping. You can provide a free service to them, like we do. For example, we do blue badge parking. That's quite common, or something like that understands people's needs. The thing is, once you go with a yardstick that I'm going to stop all the car travel, then there's a strong backlash. You have a better two-way communication. We understand there are some people who require the car. We'll provide the facilities for them. Now, a wider question for debate is, how do you differentiate between the people? That is for the policymakers and practitioners to come together and then come up with a solution.
Thank you, Pete. We've got a couple of minutes. I mean, just Ollie, a question. I mean, we're talking here about moving people. Obviously, this whole focus is around commuting being a big use trip. But mobility is about moving people and goods, and you reference cargo bikes and goods. I mean, how can organisations, how can companies, do more, learn more about how they might be able to move goods better, and not just think perhaps, because vans. If you think about vans, that's a huge growth in vans in the last few years. How many of those vans could be replaced with cargo bikes? Maybe an interesting thing.
Yeah, it is a good question. I think it's again about the cultural change point and like social modeling. People in like seeing your peers, your colleagues, people that you trust exhibiting these. And this can also be in the workplace where, for example, courier companies, once you see a big company adopting a different mode of different logistics mode, then it's more likely that their kind of competitors in that business are going to adopt it. Recently, speaking to Hackney about doing a trial with a big freight carrier, and this is then kind of brought to market a new way of doing walking freight, which other now companies are interested in. So I think it's rare that people will make the first move, but that kind of idea of like social modeling and seeing the case studies work in your peers is often the most powerful way to at least get that initial engagement and that initial consideration of changing how you're doing things. Yeah, I think that's.
Thanks, Ollie. Yeah, that's great. Just a couple of very quick fire ones. I mean, the top one there, Ashleigh, is the target in Scotland to reduce car use by 20%, or is it car kilometres?
The target that has just been dropped was to reduce car kilometres by 20% by 2030. We're waiting to see what the new one will be. And on that car occupancy rate. So if it was car kilometres, we're definitely interested in sharing, and that's one of the car sharing, and that's one of the interventions in the government's route map. But yeah, we'll wait to see what the new target is.
Okay, perfect. I've seen a few questions flick by about electric vehicles, pros and cons. I mean, I think, from a tailpipe perspective, obviously electric vehicles. I mean, from our perspective, shared electric vehicles is the holy grail. I think it's fairly common understanding that at some point in time, electric car breaks even in terms of its footprint. But yeah, there was a question there about sort of electric cars. Why are we not focusing more on them? I think it's part of the mix, but as you described, Faheem, we've got to get sustainable travel working, and hopefully the auditing that you've done, Ashleigh, is going to support that. And Ollie, let's get more people cycling. Right. We have finished the first section of transport today. I'm going to drop off now, and we're moving on to a quick video.